I was 6 days away from getting married when my fiancé disappeared for a night, came home drunk like somebody had dragged him through hell, and then looked me in the face the next day like I was the one who had betrayed him. At that point, I still thought the worst part of the story was whatever had happened to him that Saturday night. I had no idea that one old secret, something that had ended years before I ever fell in love with him, was about to blow straight through my life and take my wedding with it. My name is Brianna. Most people called me Bri. I was 25, lived in a working-class neighborhood outside Fort Worth, and at that point in my life, I thought I was finally stepping into the version of adulthood I had wanted for years. Nothing glamorous, nothing fancy, just solid. A man I loved. A simple civil ceremony at the courthouse. A lunch afterward with family and a few close friends. Some white flowers in jars. A cake my aunt had ordered from a grocery store bakery. Folding tables covered in cream-colored cloths. My mother already fussing over whether we had enough sweet tea and enough chairs. That was all. And I was happy. I need to say that clearly because sometimes when people hear what happened next, they start rewriting the beginning in their heads. They imagine signs. They imagine I was settling. They imagine he was already pulling away, and I just refused to see it. That is not how it felt to me then. Back then, it felt real. It felt mutual. It felt like two people who had found each other at the right time and were moving forward with their eyes open. His name was Owen. We had been together a year and 8 months, which probably sounded fast to some people. But to us it did not feel reckless. It felt overdue. We spent so much time together that his mother, Teresa, had stopped asking whether he was staying at my place, or I was staying at theirs. My house and his house had turned into one shared orbit. I knew what brand of coffee she bought, where she kept the good towels for guests, which floorboard in the hallway outside Owen's room creaked if you stepped on it too hard. He knew which cabinet in my kitchen held the chipped plates I used every day, and which one held the nicer set my mother only took down when company came over. He knew how I liked my burgers, how I folded towels, how I got quiet when I was tired instead of talking more. That kind of love can make you feel safe fast. The week before the wedding, my days had a strange shine to them. Even work felt lighter. I worked the front desk at a small dental office, and usually by late afternoon I was counting the minutes until I could leave. But that week I caught myself smiling at nothing while confirming appointments. I would be typing a patient's insurance information, and suddenly remember that in less than a week, I would be signing my name next to Owen's. Then my face would get hot, and I would look down so nobody noticed me grinning at a computer screen. At night, I lay in bed thinking about tiny things. What blouse Teresa might wear. Whether Owen would be nervous holding the pen at the courthouse. Whether he would squeeze my hand before or after we signed. Whether I would cry. I told myself I would not. Then I pictured it and knew I probably would. It was not a church wedding. We did not have money for anything elaborate, and honestly, I did not care. The ceremony itself was going to be small, just paperwork and witnesses, but the meaning of it was huge to me. I was not marrying a fantasy. I was marrying a real man with a real family and a real history and flaws that felt ordinary enough to live with. That mattered more. The Saturday before the wedding, Owen came over in the afternoon. We sat on my mother's back patio for a while, because the weather had turned warm enough to make the air feel soft. Not hot yet. Just that Texas spring warmth that settles around your shoulders. He had his boots kicked out in front of him, one ankle over the other, and he kept teasing me about how many lists I had made. "You've made lists for your lists," he said. "That's called organization. That's called fear." I laughed and told him he could try running the wedding if he thought it was so easy. He leaned his chair back, gave me that crooked look I loved, and said he would run it exactly the same way he ran everything else, which meant half-assed until the last minute, and then somehow perfect. He was in a good mood, relaxed. He ate the barbecue my mother made, kissed me in the kitchen while she pretended not to notice, and spent half an hour helping me carry plastic trays and paper goods out to the car because I wanted to drop them off at my aunt's house the next day. There was nothing in him that night that felt distant or angry. Nothing sharp, nothing wrong. We talked about Monday, about the courthouse, about whether his brother would make it to the lunch after all because Mason's wife had mentioned one of their kids might be sick, about how Teresa was probably going to cry harder than my own mother, about where we might eventually live after the wedding. He said maybe we should start looking for a small rental closer to my work. I said maybe we should survive the week first. Around 11, he kissed me goodbye and headed home. That is the last normal moment I can remember from that version of my life. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I wanted to because wedding nerves had made deep sleep impossible all week. I reached for my phone expecting at least one text from him. There was nothing. That was unusual, but not enough to scare me. I sent him a message asking if he was awake. No answer. I waited a little, made coffee, checked again, then called. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried once more. Same thing. I told myself he had forgotten to charge it. Owen was not the most organized man on earth. He lost chargers, left tools in the yard, forgot where he put receipts. A dead phone was not some shocking event. Still, by late morning, something about it was starting to itch at me. He knew how close we were to the wedding. He knew I would want to talk. He knew I would notice silence. I called again and got nothing. By noon, I gave up on acting casual and drove to his mother's house. The drive over should have felt familiar, and it did. But I remember every red light feeling longer than usual. Every minute dragged. I kept doing that thing people do when they are worried but trying not to be dramatic, where they make excuses for someone and then immediately poke holes in those same excuses. Maybe he overslept. Maybe he went to help somebody. Maybe he lost his phone. Maybe he was just being careless. Then another thought would slip in, colder than the rest. Maybe he was not alone last night. I hated myself for even thinking it, but I thought it. Teresa opened the front door before I even knocked a second time. The minute she saw me standing there alone, her expression changed. Not angry, not welcoming, confused. That was the first moment something in my stomach turned hard. She looked over my shoulder toward the street, like maybe Owen was parking behind me. Then she looked back at me and said, "Where's Owen?" I remember blinking at her because the question made no sense. "I came to ask you that." She frowned, then stepped fully onto the porch. "He didn't stay with you?" "No." The silence that followed was small but awful. She said, slower this time, "He didn't come home last night." I do not think my body understood those words right away. They landed one piece at a time. Didn't come home. Last night. Owen. The person I was supposed to marry in 6 days. I let out this stupid little laugh that did not sound like me. "What do you mean he didn't come home?" "I mean he never came back." Her face had already gone pale. "I thought he was with you." We stood there staring at each other like neither one of us wanted to own what that meant. If he had not slept at my house, and he had not slept at his mother's, then where had he slept? And with whom? Teresa's fear moved in one direction. Something had happened. A wreck. A fight. Trouble. Mine split in two. Part of me feared that too. The other part, the uglier part, thought immediately of another woman. I did not say it at first. We went inside. The house looked ordinary in the cruelest possible way. The TV was on low in the living room. A dish towel hung over the oven handle. Sunday sunlight cut across the linoleum in the kitchen. Everything looked like a regular day, except for the panic building inside both of us. Teresa called his aunt, then a cousin, then a friend from work. I called 2 of his buddies, one after the other. Nobody had seen him. Nobody had heard from him. One guy said maybe Owen had gone fishing early, but even as he said it, he sounded unconvinced. Another friend swore Owen had not mentioned any plans. Teresa called Mason. He said he had not seen Owen either. His voice over the speaker sounded irritated at first, then more alert when he realized Teresa was serious. The more calls we made, the worse it got. There is a kind of panic that comes with a missing person, even for just a few hours, that makes your brain lose all sense of proportion. Every possibility becomes vivid. Car in a ditch, a fight in a parking lot, a robbery, jail, another woman, dead battery, broken bones, shame, betrayal, blood, stupidity, accident, sin, lies. The mind does not pick one. It runs through all of them. By early afternoon, I could not sit still. I stood, sat, walked to the window, called again. No answer. Teresa cried once, just a little, then got angry at herself for crying and started moving faster. I remember her opening and closing cabinets like she needed to do something with her hands. I remember the smell of percolating coffee turning bitter because nobody was drinking it. At one point, she asked if I thought he might be with another woman. I had tried not to say it before then, but there was no point pretending anymore. I don't know, I said, and my own voice broke on the last word. That was the truth. I did not know. The shame of not knowing your own fiancé well enough in a moment like that cuts deep. More relatives got involved. One of his uncles started calling local hospitals. Somebody else said they should check county jail records if we did not hear anything soon. Mason called back and said he had driven by one of the bars Owen used to go to years earlier, just in case, but the place was closed. Teresa snapped at him for sounding too calm. He snapped back that panicking was not helping. Then they both went quiet. Hours passed. Sunday afternoon turned into Sunday evening, and with each hour the story in my head got worse. At first I was furious, then suspicious, then scared. Then furious again for having ever been suspicious if maybe he was actually hurt somewhere. Then suspicious again because why else would his phone be off this long? I cried once in Teresa's kitchen so hard I had to brace both hands on the counter. I could not stop thinking about the courthouse date already set, the lunch already arranged, the relatives already invited. All those details that had felt so sweet suddenly looked fragile. I loved him, but a woman can love a man and still imagine exactly how he might humiliate her. By nightfall, the whole situation had taken on that ugly, stretched feeling people get when they are waiting for disaster. Nobody wanted to say what they were thinking anymore, because saying it made it feel closer. Teresa had gone from frantic to rigid. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug she had forgotten to drink from. I stood near the front window every few minutes, even though there was nothing to see but the street light and the occasional passing truck. Then, sometime after dark, headlights swept across the front of the house. Teresa was on her feet before I was. A car door slammed. I knew it was him before I saw him. I do not know how. Maybe because my whole body had been straining toward the possibility for hours. He came through the door, and relief hit me so hard it almost knocked me weak. Then I actually saw him. He was filthy. Not bloodied, not visibly injured, but dirty in a way that looked wrong, like he had been somewhere rough and careless. His shirt was stained. His jeans were streaked with dust and something darker around one knee. He looked like he had not slept. Worse than that, he looked drunk out of his mind. Not tipsy, not sloppy in a funny way. He was fully, deeply drunk, the kind of drunk that turns a person heavy and unreachable. The smell hit before he spoke. Alcohol, sweat, stale air, something sour underneath it. Teresa rushed him first. She threw her arms around him, crying out his name, asking where he had been, what had happened, why he had done this to us. I moved toward him too, not even thinking, just desperate to touch him and confirm he was real and alive. He pulled away from both of us. Not violently at first, but coldly. He peeled Teresa's arms off him, shrugged my hand off his sleeve, and started down the hallway without answering a single question. "Owen," I said, "what happened?" "Nothing," He kept walking. Teresa called after him, then grabbed his arm. He jerked free. I had never seen him treat his mother like that. I had never seen him treat me like that either. It was not just the drinking. There was something else in him. Something shut. He stumbled into his room, missed the doorframe with one shoulder, cursed under his breath, and collapsed onto the bed without taking off his boots. From the hallway, I could see him half on his side, one arm flung across the mattress, breathing hard through his mouth. He was unconscious within seconds. That was it. That was all we got after a full day of fear. No explanation, no apology, not even one coherent lie. Teresa stood in the doorway staring at him with that exhausted, trembling fury mothers get when relief and anger crash into each other. I stood behind her, looking past her shoulder at the man I was supposed to marry in less than a week, and I felt two things at once. Thank God he is alive. What the hell did he do? The room smelled so strongly of liquor it seemed to leak out into the hallway. One of his boots had scraped dirt onto the floor. His phone was nowhere I could see. I noticed his knuckles looked red, but I could not tell if they were scraped or if the skin was just irritated. There was a tiny tear near the pocket seam of his shirt. None of it added up to anything clear. That made it worse. I wanted to stay. I wanted to be there when he woke up and force the truth out of him before he could arrange it into something cleaner. But Teresa finally turned to me and said very quietly, "Go home, sweetheart. He's not waking up anytime soon. I'm not leaving until he explains. He can't explain anything like this." She pressed her lips together and looked back at him. "Go home. Try to rest. We'll talk tomorrow." Rest. I almost laughed in her face, but I could see she was barely holding herself together, and the truth was she was right. There was no conversation to be had with a man passed out in his clothes, reeking of booze, after vanishing for nearly 24 hours. So I kissed her cheek, though I do not remember deciding to, and drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my fingers hurt. That night was a long, ugly tunnel. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind started making scenes. Owen in a bar. Owen in someone else's bed. Owen swinging at somebody in a parking lot. Owen getting caught in a lie. Owen crying. Owen wrecked. Owen ashamed. Owen guilty. Owen innocent. It never stayed one thing for long. I cried until I gave myself a headache, then lay awake staring at the ceiling until dawn started thinning the dark around my curtains. On Monday morning, I called him before I got out of bed. His phone was still off. That more than anything lit my temper. I called Teresa. She said he had gotten up early, showered, changed, skipped breakfast, and left for work without explaining where he had been or what had happened. Not to her. Not to anyone. She said he looked rough, still pale under the eyes, but sober. She said she tried to stop him in the kitchen and he only told her he had to go. I asked if he had his phone. She said she did not know. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall. I remember the morning light looked too bright, almost insulting. People were driving to work. Kids were waiting for school buses. My own life was splitting open and the neighborhood was just doing what neighborhoods do on a Monday. I went to work because I did not know what else to do. That day felt endless. I moved through it like somebody wearing the wrong body. Patients checked in. Phones rang. Insurance cards slid across the counter toward me. A woman asked if we could reschedule her cleaning. A child cried in one of the exam rooms. My coworker asked if I was excited for the wedding, and I smiled so automatically it scared me. Inside, I was shaking. I kept checking my phone. Nothing. I kept replaying his face when he came through the front door. The distance in it. The refusal. The way he had brushed me off like I had no right to touch him. By lunchtime, I was no longer just worried. I was angry. Not hot, dramatic anger. Something denser. I had spent all Sunday terrified for him, and he was walking around the world sober now, going to work, avoiding me, while I was supposed to just sit there and wait for him to decide when my panic deserved an explanation. That was not like us. It wasn't. We had fought before, of course. Real relationships do. Over money. Over family obligations. Over his habit of agreeing to help everybody with everything, and then leaving me hanging when we had plans. Over my own tendency to overthink things before they were even problems. But this kind of silence was new. This kind of punishment was new. It felt deliberate. By the time I got off work, I had made up my mind. I was going to his mother's house again. I was done calling. I pulled into my driveway first just to change clothes and splash water on my face because I looked almost as wrecked as I felt. I had just stepped onto the porch when I saw a familiar truck slowing in front of the house. It was his. My heart jumped so violently I had to stop walking. He parked at the curb, turned the engine off, and sat there for a second before getting out. Even from a distance, I could see something was off in the way he moved. Not drunk this time. Tight. Controlled. But not calm. For one stupid, hopeful second, I thought, good. He came. He knows he needs to explain. We're finally going to talk, and this nightmare is going to make some kind of sense. That is the kind of hope people cling to right before they get hit with the truth. I walked toward him. He did not smile. He did not open his arms. He did not kiss my cheek, or say hello, or ask how I was after leaving me terrified all day Sunday. He just stood there beside his truck with his jaw set, and his eyes on me in a way I had never seen before. There was accusation in it. Maybe even disgust. It made no sense. If anybody should have been angry, it was me. I stopped a few feet away and waited for him to speak. He didn't. So I said, "Are you going to tell me what happened?" He stared at me for another second, then said, "I think you're the one who owes me an explanation." The words were so absurd, so out of line with everything I had lived through in the previous 36 hours, that for a moment, I honestly wondered if he was still half drunk. "What?" "I said," he repeated, "you owe me an explanation." I remember taking one step closer, almost laughing because I could not process the arrogance of it. "Are you serious right now? You disappear all night, your phone's off, your mother and I think something happened to you. You come home falling down drunk, and somehow I'm the one with explaining to do?" He did not answer that. Instead, he asked very flatly, "Did you and Mason used to mess around?" My entire body went cold. It was the kind of cold that starts in the center of you and goes straight out to your hands. My skin prickled. My mouth dried up. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking somewhere down the street, and a lawnmower running 2 houses over. And somehow those ordinary sounds made the moment feel even worse. Because yes, years ago, before Owen and I had ever become anything, before I had ever imagined marrying him, when I was 16 and foolish and full of all the wrong kinds of longing, I had kissed his older brother. More than once. Mason. Not Owen. Mason. Back then, Mason had been the kind of older guy girls noticed. Not movie star handsome, but older in a way that mattered when you were 16, and he was already in that stage of life where he carried himself like he knew more than you. He had that easy confidence some young men have when they know girls blush around them. He knew I liked him. Everybody knew. At least that was how it felt to me then. He came close. I let him. We never had sex. That part is important, because Owen asked it later, and I told him the truth. We kissed. We hid it. We met up a handful of times. It was never serious to Mason, and if I am honest, some part of me probably knew that, even then. But when you are 16, being chosen for attention can feel a lot like being loved. It ended exactly the way those things end when one person is older and less invested. He pushed farther than I wanted to go. I got scared. I said no. Then he lost interest. That was the whole story. It hurt at the time. Then I grew up. Years passed. Mason got married, had kids, moved to another part of the neighborhood. By the time I got together with Owen, that old teenage chapter felt buried so deep it might as well have happened to a different girl entirely. I had never told Owen, not because I was carrying a torch, not because there was anything ongoing, not because I was cheating, hiding, or living some double life. I never told him because it was dead history from when I was 16, and by the time he and I fell in love, it felt so irrelevant that bringing it up would have made it sound bigger than it had ever been. That is the truth I still stand on. But standing there in my yard, with his face hard as stone, I knew none of that was going to sound simple. He repeated the question, "Did you?" I could not answer right away. Not because I wanted to lie. Because the shock of hearing that name from his mouth was like being slapped. He gave one short nod, bitter and ugly. That's what I thought. "Owen, listen to me. So it's true." "Yes, but it was years ago." "How many years?" "Almost 10. He laughed once, but there was nothing amused in it. "Amazing. We were about to get married, and you forgot to mention you used to hook up with my brother." "We kissed when I was 16, I said. "That's what happened. It was stupid. It was a long time ago, and it had nothing to do with you and me." "Nothing to do with me?" he snapped. "He's my brother." I said his name again, softer this time, because I could feel the whole conversation starting to run away from me. "I was a kid. I didn't even know you then." He stared at me like he no longer believed a word out of my mouth. That look broke something in me. I started explaining too fast, tripping over details because I could already feel him building a version of me in his head that was filthier than the truth. I told him Mason and I had never had sex. I told him it was hidden and brief and stupid. I told him Mason had tried to push things farther and I had shut it down. I told him it had been over forever by the time Owen and I started seeing each other. I told him I had no contact with Mason beyond the unavoidable family overlap that came from him being Owen's brother. I told him there had never been anything between us while Owen and I were together. Not one message, not one look, not one secret. He listened with that flat, hostile silence some people mistake for self-control. Then he asked the question that made my stomach drop all over again. "Did you lose your virginity to him?" "No." The answer came out instantly because it was true. But he looked at me like truth itself had become optional. "I don't know what to believe." "You can believe me." "Can I?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was old. Because it was humiliating. Because I was 16. Because it had meant too much to me and too little to him. Because I was ashamed of the girl I had been in that chapter. The girl who thought hidden affection from an older guy counted as love. Because I did not want Mason's name sitting in the middle of my relationship like a bad smell. Because by the time you and I got serious, it felt dead. I said some of that. Not all of it. There was too much to say, and he was already too far gone emotionally to hear it. "What would telling you have changed?" I asked finally. It was over years before us. He looked away toward the street, then back at me. "It would have changed whether I was stupid enough to stand there and marry you without knowing." That sentence hit hard. Not because it was clever, because it was cruel. I stepped closer and reached for his arm on instinct, trying to slow the moment down, trying to get him to stay in it with me instead of turning it into a verdict. He jerked away so sharply it was like I had burned him. "Don't." My eyes filled right then, more from humiliation than heartbreak. The heartbreak came later. In that moment, what I felt most was the shock of being treated like contamination by the man who had kissed me in my mother's kitchen less than 48 hours earlier. "Who told you?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said, "Lucy." That stunned me almost as much as the question about Mason. Lucy was my cousin, not my closest cousin, but close enough. We had grown up in the same orbit. She knew what had happened with Mason back then because I had told her when I was a teenager, the same way girls tell each other embarrassing things in whispers and think those whispers will die with them. She knew how young I had been. She knew it had gone nowhere. She knew it ended before it ever became what I imagined it might. And she chose to tell my fiancé 6 days before our wedding, not 5 years earlier, not when Owen and I first got serious, not when we got engaged. 6 days before the wedding. The timing itself told a story. Why would she do that? I asked. But I was not really asking him. I was asking the world. He shrugged one shoulder, but the bitterness in him was boiling over now. Maybe because she thought I should know. Or maybe because she wants to ruin something. He laughed again, harsher this time. You really want to make yourself the victim here? I am not making anything happen. She told you something from when I was 16 and you vanished all night like a maniac instead of talking to me. His eyes flashed. There it was. The part of him that had spent all Sunday drinking whatever poison this news had turned into inside his head. So that's what this is? He said. You're mad about how I reacted? I'm mad that you disappeared. I needed air. You needed a bar. He took one step toward me then, not enough to frighten me physically, but enough to make the air between us feel dangerous. Don't do that. Don't do what? Tell the truth. You should have told me. And you should have come to me. For 1 second I thought maybe we had reached the real center of it, the simple broken core. Hurt pride, shock, family betrayal, bad timing, shame. I thought maybe if we just kept talking, if we stayed in the ugly truth long enough, we might still find our way back to each other. Then he said, maybe I should go ask Mason what really happened. My face went hot with anger, so sudden it almost steadied me. Go ahead. Ask him. Ask the same man who used me when I was a teenager if you think he's the cleaner source of truth. That landed. I saw it. But it did not soften him. It just made him look more conflicted, which at that point was nearly as bad. He was angry at me, angry at Mason, angry at himself, angry at the whole idea that the woman he loved had once been touched by somebody in his own family. It was primitive, and ugly, and irrational. But I could see it happening in real time. Something in him had snapped around ownership, pride, humiliation, all of it twisted together. He backed away. I can't do this right now. You already said that yesterday, with your whole disappearing act. He flinched like I had slapped him, then opened the truck door. I'm serious, Bri. So am I. I wiped at my face with the heel of my hand. You do not get to punish me for who I was before you ever loved me. He paused with one hand on the door. For a second I thought he might answer like the man I knew. Instead he said, maybe I don't know who I'm marrying. Then he got in and drove away. I stood in my own yard until the truck turned the corner and disappeared. It is amazing how fast a body can go from heat to emptiness. 1 minute I was burning with anger, humiliation, disbelief. The next I just felt hollow. The wedding had been so close that every object around me still belonged to it. Ribbon in the back seat of my car. A garment bag hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Paper goods stacked by the hallway wall. My future was everywhere in plain sight, and suddenly all of it looked flimsy, ridiculous. I went inside and cried in the bathroom because I did not want my mother hearing the first version of it through a bedroom wall. After that, everything started moving in jagged pieces. I called Lucy first, not because she deserved the courtesy, but because rage gives a person direction. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding casual. Too casual. I asked her why she had told Owen about Mason. There was a beat of silence. Then she gave me this weak, slippery answer about assuming he already knew. She said she had not meant anything by it. Said it came up. Said she thought it was old news. Said she was sorry if the timing was bad. If the timing was bad, I could have screamed. There are lies so pathetic they insult you twice. Once by what they hide, and once by how little effort they think you deserve. That was one of them. She knew exactly what she was doing. I could hear it in the careful innocence of her tone. "You told my fiancé 6 days before our wedding," I said. "Don't stand there and tell me timing just happened." "I didn't think it would be a big deal." "Then why tell him at all?" No answer worth anything. By the time we hung up, I was shaking with fury. Later I learned that after leaving my house, Owen had gone to confront Mason. I was not there for that part, so I can only tell it the way it came back to me through family mouths, each person adding a little and trimming a little. But the broad picture was consistent. Owen went to Mason's place angry and half wild. He accused him. He wanted details. He wanted admissions. At some point, the two of them ended up nose to nose in the yard, voices raised loud enough for at least one neighbor to hear. Owen tried to swing on him. Mason blocked it or shoved him back, depending on who was telling it. Teresa heard afterward that it looked ridiculous. Two grown men circling around an old teenage secret as if time had not moved for any of them. What mattered to me was not the exact choreography of the fight. What mattered was that while I was still trying to save my relationship, Owen had gone looking for truth everywhere except the person he was supposed to marry. I kept trying anyway. That is one of the humiliating parts of this story, and I refuse to pretty it up now. I chased him. Not because I lacked self-respect in every area of my life, but because love and shock together can make a person fight hardest right when they should be stepping back. I called, texted, asked to meet, asked him to let me explain again when he was calmer. Asked him if he really believed a buried story from when I was 16 outweighed the whole relationship we had built. Sometimes he answered with one cold sentence, sometimes not at all. One evening I went to Teresa's house because she called and said he was there. I sat with her in the kitchen for almost 20 minutes before he came in from outside. He took one look at me and went rigid. "Please don't leave," I said before he could turn away. He stayed, but only barely. Leaning against the counter, arms folded, face closed. I told him again there had never been overlap between him and Mason. Told him again I had not hidden some active betrayal. Told him again that Lucy's timing was malicious and his reaction was disproportionate and cruel. Told him again that if he needed to be angry for a little while, fine. But we had to talk like adults because there was a wedding in front of us and families already involved. He let me speak. Then he said, "You made me look stupid." I looked at him across Teresa's kitchen table and felt something inside me sink, because that was the center of it. More than grief, more than confusion, more than moral outrage, what Owen could not get over was humiliation. The idea that there had been a hidden line connecting me to his brother, even years before him, made him feel played. And once a person gets trapped inside that kind of pride, they start treating pain like proof. "You are not stupid," I said. "You're hurt. That's different. Don't tell me what I am. I'm trying to help you remember reality." He shook his head slowly. "Reality is, you let me get all the way to the altar without telling me. It was a courthouse." He stared at me. I do not know why I said that. Maybe because I was exhausted. Maybe because some petty corner of me needed to puncture the grandeur of his suffering. Whatever the reason, Teresa covered her mouth like she almost laughed, and then immediately looked guilty for it. Owen went colder. He said, "Maybe you should have gone after Mason." Teresa snapped, "Owen." But he was not listening to her. He was looking straight at me with that mean little fracture pride creates in some men, the part that would rather wound than reason. I stood up so fast my chair scraped hard against the floor. "That is enough." He said nothing. I waited for him to walk it back. He didn't. Teresa started talking then, trying to mediate, trying to remind him that what happened had happened years before, that he had no right to talk to me like I had cheated on him last week, that adults do not throw away a wedding over something from a woman's teenage years. He would not hear her either. He kept repeating variations of the same thing. You should have told me. You made me a fool. I can't get past it. I can't stop seeing it. I can't stand the idea of everybody else knowing. Everybody else. That phrase stuck with me. Everybody else. As if the entire neighborhood had been standing around laughing behind his back. As if my 16-year-old self had conspired across time to humiliate the man I would someday marry. It was irrational. But irrationality does not stop feeling powerful just because it is stupid. I left that night worse than before. A few days earlier, I had still believed we were dealing with a crisis. Something painful but survivable. Now I was starting to understand that he was not fighting for us through his anger. He was feeding the anger, protecting it, using it to justify decisions he had not fully named yet. People around us tried to intervene. My mother, Teresa, one of his uncles, even a mutual friend. That only made him dig in harder. Every attempt to reach him seemed to confirm his sense that he was the injured party, and everybody else was minimizing what had been done to him. Done to him. That language kept growing in his head. The wedding date got close enough that avoiding decisions was no longer possible. The courthouse appointment was on the books. My aunt had already bought food for the lunch. A family friend had arranged flowers as a gift. My dress, nothing dramatic, just a cream-colored fitted dress that made me feel pretty and grown, hung in my room waiting to be worn. I still believed right up until the end that he might come back to himself. I really did. Because some part of me kept thinking, he loves me. He knows me. Once the first shock settles, once the booze burns out, once the masculine pride stops screaming in his head, he'll realize what he's doing. He didn't. The call came short and blunt. He said, "There's not going to be a wedding." I asked him to repeat it because my brain rejected the sentence. "There's not going to be a wedding," he said again. "Cancel whatever you need to cancel." That was how he ended it, not with sorrow, not with regret, with the practical tone of a man closing an account. I cannot fully describe what that did to me. People talk about heartbreak like it is one clean emotion. It isn't. It is grief, yes, but also humiliation, disbelief, rage, begging, denial, memory, nausea. It is looking around your room and seeing evidence of plans that no longer have anywhere to land. It is knowing people will ask questions. It is wondering what story he is telling while you are still trying to understand your own. I asked him if he was really throwing us away over something that happened when I was 16. He said he could not marry me after what he knew now. I asked if he loved me. He did not answer right away. Then he said, "It doesn't matter." That hurt more than the cancellation itself, because love might have saved us if he had still been willing to let it mean anything. But by then his pride had turned love into an inconvenience. I begged after that. I'm not proud of it, but I will not lie about it either. I asked him to wait a week, to postpone, not cancel, to breathe, to think, to remember who we had been before Lucy dropped that match into dry grass. I told him he was acting like I had slept with his brother the night before. I told him he was punishing me for a teenage mistake that had ended before I could even vote. I told him if he needed honesty, then fine. Here it was in full, ugly detail. But honesty did not have to mean destroying everything. Nothing moved him. The wedding was off. The courthouse appointment was canceled. The lunch was canceled. My mother cried while boxing up decorations. My aunt quietly returned what food she could and froze the rest. I took the dress off its hanger and shoved it to the back of my closet because looking at it made my chest hurt. And even after all that, after he had made the worst of it official, I still went after him one more time, because heartbreak has a way of keeping hope alive long past dignity. I thought the devastation had already reached bottom. I was wrong. Because what I did not know yet, what was still moving toward me while I was crying over a canceled marriage, was that Lucy had not just wanted to tell the truth. She had wanted something for herself. What finally broke the last piece of me was not learning that Lucy had wanted my wedding ruined. It was learning that Owen had given her exactly what she wanted. In the first days after everything collapsed, I was too deep in my own humiliation to think clearly about anybody else's motives. I was busy surviving the practical mess of a wedding that no longer existed. Returning things, dodging calls, enduring the pity in people's voices. Pretending I was eating when my mother put food in front of me. Waking up every morning with that first stunned second before the truth returned. Then feeling it slam back into my body like a door. I kept replaying every conversation, every expression, every missed chance to say something differently. I did that cruel thing people do after loss, where they go back through the whole relationship like there must have been one sentence, one decision, one turn they could have taken that would have stopped the collapse. If I had told him about Mason earlier, would this have happened? If I had reacted less defensively in the yard, would he have listened? If I had not reached for him, if I had let him stew one more day, if I had gone to Teresa first instead of Lucy, if I had said more, said less, cried less, stayed colder, been softer. My mind kept building alternate versions of the same week, and every one of them still ended in the same place. No wedding, no fiancé, no future I had been preparing to step into. At first, the only thing I knew about Lucy was what she had already admitted without admitting, which was enough for me to understand that her timing had been deliberate. But deliberate does not always mean romantic. Sometimes it just means malicious, jealous, bored, mean. I did not yet know which one she was. Then, one afternoon, maybe a week and a half after the wedding should have happened, I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold when my friend Kayla came by unannounced. Kayla was not the kind of woman who dropped in just to ask how you were doing. She showed up when there was something real to say. She lived 3 streets over, knew half the neighborhood, and had that blunt honesty I usually appreciated and sometimes feared. She hugged me first, hard, without talking. Then she sat down across from me and looked at my face for a few seconds like she was deciding how direct to be. That made my stomach tighten immediately. "What?" I asked. She glanced toward the living room to make sure my mother was out of earshot. I heard something. I think I already knew it would be bad from the way she said it. Not dramatic, not excited, flat, cautious. The tone people use when they wish they did not have information, but know they would hate themselves for sitting on it. Just say it. She rubbed her thumb over the side of her mug and said, "Lucy has been messing with Owen for a while." I remember my body going very still. What does that mean? It means she's been after him. There is a strange kind of pain that does not arrive as pain at first. It arrives as clarity, like one piece sliding into place so cleanly that your whole stomach drops before the emotion catches up. I said, "No." Kayla did not flinch. "Bri. No, if that were true, somebody would have told me." She gave me a look that answered the whole sentence. Somebody would have. They just hadn't. Not until now. I felt heat rising up my neck, but my hands had gone cold again, the same cold from the day Owen asked me about Mason. I hated that my body remembered betrayal before my mind even finished processing it. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Kayla did, slowly, carefully. Lucy had been making eyes at Owen for longer than I knew. Not just flirting in that tacky, attention-hungry way some women flirt with any man who looks at them. More than that, pushing herself into conversations, looking for chances to be alone with him at family get-togethers, messaging him sometimes. And according to Kayla, this was the part people had been whispering about, without bringing it to me. There had been at least a few times when Owen had not exactly pushed her away. A few times. That phrase was so ugly in its vagueness it almost made me laugh. "How many is a few?" I asked. Kayla shook her head. "I don't know exactly. I heard they kissed once a while back. maybe more than once. And I heard he knew she was into him. Kissed once, maybe more than once. He knew. The room seemed to sharpen around me. Every edge got clearer. The small chip in the sugar bowl. The hum of the refrigerator. The faint smell of laundry detergent from a load my mother had left in the dryer. It all became painfully vivid, the way ordinary things do when your life tilts hard enough to make them look obscene. The same man, I said slowly, who stood in my yard and acted like I had defiled him because I kissed his brother when I was 16. Kayla did not say anything. She did not need to. I got up so fast the chair legs scraped back hard against the floor. I paced from the table to the sink and back again, because if I had stayed still, I might have thrown something. Anger is different when grief has already weakened you. It does not always come out loud. Sometimes it comes out precise. When I looked back at Kayla, I could hear my own voice changing. So, Lucy tells him about Mason 6 days before the wedding. He knows she wants him. He may already have messed around with her. Then he goes into some giant moral panic about my past and cancels our wedding. Kayla nodded once. I laughed, and it sounded terrible. That's not hurt pride. That's cover. She held my gaze. That's what I thought too. That sentence landed harder than everything before it. Not because it was new, because it named what my gut had already begun to suspect, and what I had been too broken to say cleanly. Owen's outrage might not have been entirely fake. I think it was real to him in the moment. But that did not mean it was the whole story. People can feel something sincerely and still use it strategically. They can be wounded and opportunistic at the same time. The more I sat with it, the more I saw the shape of it. Maybe learning about Mason had bruised his pride. Maybe it had also handed him an exit from marriage, from commitment, from whatever doubts he had never said out loud. An exit that let him look offended instead of cowardly. An exit that turned me into the problem while he walked out with his self-image intact. And if Lucy was waiting in the wings, feeding the fire, wanting me gone, then all he had to do was stay angry long enough to let the rest arrange itself. That thought made me feel physically sick. Kayla left after a while, but I could not sit with what she had told me. I needed more than rumor, more than neighborhood smoke. If my life had been burned down as cover for somebody else's appetite, I wanted proof. That was the beginning of a different phase of the story, the one where heartbreak turned into investigation. I did not become some genius detective. I did what wounded women have done forever. I started paying attention without flinching away from what I might find. First, I went through old moments I had dismissed at the time. Family barbecues where Lucy somehow ended up near Owen no matter where he stood. The way she laughed too hard at his jokes. The way she once brushed lint off his shirt in front of me like it was a right. The afternoon at my aunt's birthday when I caught her and Owen outside on the side porch mid-conversation, both of them going a little too quiet when I came out. At the time I had read that as awkwardness, because Lucy could be shameless with men in a general way, and Owen had always looked mildly uncomfortable with female attention. But now those memories changed shape. Then there were the little things that had seemed too petty to name before. Lucy always asking if Owen was coming when I showed up anywhere alone. Lucy once saying, with that fake light tone she used when she wanted to plant something ugly without taking ownership of it, that Owen looked tired lately, and maybe men got cold feet before weddings more often than women realized. Me brushing it off, her smiling. I could feel myself getting angrier with every recalled detail. The problem with betrayal is that it reaches backward. It does not just damage the present, it poisons memory. 2 days later, Teresa called and asked if I could come by. Her voice sounded tired in a different way than before, less panicked now, more worn down, like she had spent too many days carrying a mess she could not clean. I almost said no, because I did not trust myself to step foot in that house without breaking apart. but something in me wanted answers more than comfort. So I went. The house looked exactly the same as it had on the Sunday Owen disappeared. Same curtains, same pale hallway, same ceramic rooster on the kitchen counter. But I no longer entered it like family. That change was invisible and still impossible not to feel. Teresa made coffee neither of us really wanted. We sat at the kitchen table in the exact spots where we had sat while waiting for her son to come home, smelling like alcohol and secrecy. For a minute, she just stared at her hands. Then she said, "I'm ashamed of him." Not angry, not disappointed. Ashamed. That word mattered because mothers will forgive almost anything in private. But shame means they have seen something in their child that offends their own sense of right and wrong. I swallowed. "Why are you telling me that now?" She looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but not from fresh crying, from accumulated crying. "Because I think you deserve the truth, and I'm not sure he's going to give it to you." I waited. She told me she had confronted Owen again after the wedding was canceled. Not gently this time. She said she had asked him point blank whether there was anything going on between him and Lucy. Anything at all, before or after he ended things with me. At first he denied it. Then he softened that denial into technicalities. Then he got angry at being questioned, which, as Teresa said, was not the behavior of a man with clean hands. "What did he admit?" I asked. Her face hardened the way decent women's faces do when they are forced to say words that disgust them. "He said nothing happened while you two were together that counted." That counted. I almost smiled from pure contempt. "He said Lucy had made passes at him before," Teresa continued. "He said he didn't encourage it. Then he said maybe he hadn't exactly stopped it clearly enough either." I sat there with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Teresa kept going because once truth starts leaking, it rarely does so elegantly. She said Lucy had been texting him for some time. Nothing explicit, according to him, at least not in the messages he still had, but enough to make intent obvious. Flirty, suggestive, always circling, always available. He had not shut it down. He liked being wanted, Teresa said with obvious disgust. He liked the attention. That alone would have been enough to break something in me. But there was more. After he learned about Mason, after he disappeared and drank all Sunday, after he came to my house and looked at me like I was some kind of fraud, he had apparently seen Lucy again. Teresa did not know if he sought her out or if she reached for him first. Maybe both. But by then, the line had already snapped. She said he finally admitted that he had kissed Lucy after the wedding was called off. I closed my eyes. Even now, what hurt most about that moment was not the kiss itself. Men kiss women. Relationships end. People make trash choices. What hurt was the sequence. The moral theater of it. The way he had climbed so high onto his own outrage that he acted like I had stained him beyond repair, when all along he was standing one step away from the very woman who lit the fire. "How long?" I asked. "I don't know exactly." "Did he tell you he loved her?" "No." "Did he tell you he wanted her before this?" She hesitated too long. That was answer enough. I opened my eyes and looked at her. He was already halfway out, wasn't he? Tears filled hers instantly. I don't know. Maybe. I think maybe he didn't know himself. I think he liked being admired, and he liked feeling wanted, and he was too weak to be honest about it. Too weak. That was the cleanest description anybody had offered yet. Not tragic. Not misunderstood. Weak. I sat there for a long moment, trying to absorb the shape of the man I had been about to marry. Not a movie villain. Not some master planner. Worse, in a way. A weak man with pride strong enough to destroy, and character too thin to hold steady when temptation and injury met in the same week. Teresa reached across the table then and touched my hand. "I am so sorry." I nodded because I believed she meant it. But the apology floated around uselessly. The damage did not live in that kitchen anymore. It lived in everything ahead of me. I asked her one more question before I left. Are they together? She looked away, which was all I needed. Tell me. She swallowed. I've heard they've been seeing each other, openly now. That word hit just as hard as I feared it would. Openly, as if shame had become freedom, as if once I was out of the way, they did not even have to lower their voices. I drove home in a state so cold, it no longer felt like ordinary sadness. There is a point after enough betrayal where crying almost becomes too soft for what you feel. I had moved past heartbreak and into something flatter, meaner, more lucid. He did not just leave me. He left me holding the blame while stepping toward the woman who helped break us. Whether he planned it consciously or simply slid into it because it was easy no longer mattered much to me. The effect was the same. The next few weeks were ugly, not cinematic ugly, neighborhood ugly. The kind that spreads by whispers and sideways glances and bits of information carried by people who think they are being kind by only telling you half of what they know. I learned they had been seen together more than once. At a gas station. At a restaurant 20 minutes away, probably thinking distance made them invisible. In his truck near the edge of a shopping center parking lot. Then finally, at a family cookout, where they did not exactly arrive holding hands, but they left no real room for doubt either. That last one made me laugh from shock when I heard it. A family cookout. The same family web they had torn through, and now they were walking back into it, as if the only thing they needed was enough nerve. I did not go to that cookout, obviously, but my aunt did. She came home furious. Not for my sake only, though that was part of it. Furious because public indecency of the moral kind offends older women in a special way. She said Lucy spent the whole afternoon acting sugary and nervous, like everybody would mistake fake humility for innocence. She said Owen looked defensive from the minute he got there, which meant he knew exactly how bad it looked. She said one cousin barely spoke to either of them. She said Mason kept his distance like he wanted no part of any of it. She said Teresa looked 10 years older by the time she left. That image stayed with me longest. Not Lucy smirking. Not Owen avoiding eye contact. Teresa, aged by the public consequences of her son's weakness. There were moments in those early weeks when revenge fantasies came easy. I wanted to humiliate them. I wanted to tell everybody every hypocritical detail. I wanted to drag Lucy by her perfect hair across every room where she had ever smiled in my face. I wanted to ask Owen, in front of witnesses, whether kissing my cousin somehow felt less disgusting to him than me having kissed his brother before I even knew him. I wanted a lot of things. But that is where the moral limit of the story showed up for me. I did not go to their jobs. I did not slash tires. I did not start a screaming match in a grocery store aisle. I did not write some giant social media post naming names and begging people to validate my pain, partly because my mother raised me better than that, partly because I knew public chaos tends to stain the wrong person in the end, but mostly because even at my angriest, I could feel one line inside myself I refused to cross. I would tell the truth when asked. I would not turn into them. That choice cost me something. Silence always costs the wounded person something. When you do not explode, people sometimes mistake restraint for weakness. They assume you are more okay than you are. They think the story has ended because the public scene never happened. Meanwhile, you are bleeding in private and teaching yourself not to make a spectacle out of pain. I paid that cost. There were nights I lay awake rehearsing confrontations I never ended up having. There were mornings I woke from dreams where the wedding still existed and had to feel the loss all over again. There were days I could not drive past the courthouse exit without feeling sick. At work, I learned how to smile through humiliation, because not everybody knew the details, but enough people knew something had happened. And there is no graceful way to be the woman whose almost husband walked away days before the ceremony. The worst practical loss, strange as it sounds, was not the money. We did lose some. deposits, food, small purchases that add up when a wedding falls apart last minute. But money can be counted. What I lost was harder to measure. A version of myself. The woman who had stood on that patio making lists and feeling safe. The woman who believed love plus effort plus honesty were enough if both people wanted the same future. She did not survive that month intact. What eventually helped me was not closure, because I never got the kind people imagine. Closure is mostly a myth sold to the betrayed by people who have never had their reality rearranged by somebody else's cowardice. What I got instead was accumulation. Enough facts, enough patterns, enough repeated behavior from both of them to make denial impossible. Once I could see the whole outline, the obsessive question of why started losing some of its grip. Lucy wanted what I had. Owen wanted to be wanted more than he wanted to be good. And when his pride got wounded, he let those two things join hands. That was the truth. Months passed, not quickly, not gracefully, but they passed. I stopped begging because one day I heard myself in my own memory and could not bear it anymore. I stopped asking mutual friends what they had heard because every new detail only deepened a wound that no longer needed more evidence. I stopped waiting for some grand remorse from him, because weak men rarely deliver their guilt in forms that heal anybody. If anything, they rewrite themselves as tragic and misunderstood, because that version hurts their ego less than the honest one. I heard through others that he and Lucy were still together, then not together, then circling each other again, then together enough to be seen. Their relationship, if you could call it that, sounded built on the exact material you would expect. Secrecy, performance, ego, competition. Nothing steady, nothing clean. The kind of bond two people build when the beginning itself is rotten. And yes, some sick part of me took comfort in that, not because I had become vindictive enough to live off their misery, because it confirmed something important. He had not left me for some great true love he suddenly discovered. He had not thrown away our wedding for a cleaner, more honest life. He had slid toward the nearest woman feeding his damaged pride. That matters. Maybe not to the world, but to the woman left behind, it matters. The most surreal moment came maybe 4 months after everything ended. I ran into Owen at a hardware store. It was early evening. I was there with my mother looking at paint samples because she had decided, in the way women do after surviving enough ugliness, that the guest room needed refreshing, and apparently I was helping. I was holding 3 shades of pale beige I could barely tell apart when I looked up and saw him halfway down the aisle. For one suspended second, all the old pain rushed back so fast it felt fresh. Then something surprising happened. It did not stay pain. He looked older. Not physically older exactly, but diminished. The sharpness he had worn during that whole collapse, the self-righteous energy of it, was gone. In its place was something flatter. Not repentance, not wisdom. Just where? He saw me too, stopped, hesitated, then started toward me like he thought we were obligated to perform adulthood. My mother went rigid beside me. He said my name carefully. Bri. I did not answer right away. He glanced at my mother, nodded to her, then looked back at me. How have you been? That question, coming from him, almost made me laugh in his face. How had I been? As if there were a version of events in which he did not know. As well as can be expected, I said. He nodded once, eyes dropping for half a second to the paint cards in my hand. I never wanted things to happen the way they did. There it was. The coward's apology. Not I was wrong. Not I hurt you. Not I let pride and temptation rot my judgment. Just the passive fog of things happened. I could feel my mother beside me, silent and furious. I could also feel the old version of myself, the pleading one, almost stir and then die. Because standing there in fluorescent light, between shelves of paint and caulk and cheap home repair tools, I saw him clearly for maybe the first time in the entire story. Not my almost husband. Not my heartbreak. Just a man who had failed a test of character and was now trying to live in the softer grammar of regret. So I said, "They didn't happen. You chose them." His face changed. Just slightly, but enough. I kept going because for once I had no tears left to get in the way. "You don't get to act like that week was weather. Lucy told you something from my teenage years, and you used it to blow up our wedding while stepping toward her. Whatever else you felt, that part was a choice." He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to explain. I did not let him. "I loved you," I said. "And if all you wanted was out, you could have told the truth. You didn't need to make me carry the shame for both of you." He looked down then. That was the closest thing to genuine discomfort I ever got from him. Not enough, but real. He said quietly, "It wasn't like that." I almost smiled. It was exactly like that. Then I turned and walked away. My mother followed me without a word. Once we got to the car, she grabbed my hand so hard it hurt and said, "Good." That single syllable gave me more peace than most of the conversations that had come before it. Because the truth is, healing did not come when he suffered. It did not come when people judged Lucy. It did not come from waiting for karma to arrange itself into something dramatic and visible. Healing started slowly when I stopped trying to prove the obvious to people determined not to see it. When I stopped asking my wound to justify itself. When I stopped treating his confusion as complexity instead of what it mostly was, weakness. I wish I could say I never cried over him again after that hardware store encounter. That would make a neat story. It would also be a lie. I did cry again, less often, less helplessly. But grief is not obedient. It revisits, especially when the loss included humiliation, because humiliation leaves behind little hooks that ordinary sadness does not. Still, the direction had changed. I started rebuilding in plain ways. I took extra shifts and saved money. I cut my hair shorter than I ever had before, not because women in pain always do that like a cliché, but because I was tired of carrying the version of myself that had belonged to him. I repainted my room. I donated the dress. I stopped asking mutual friends for updates and told the ones who kept bringing him up that I was done discussing him. Some listened faster than others. Eventually I could hear his name without my body bracing. That was freedom. Not forgetting. Not forgiving in the cheap sense. Just no longer organizing my nervous system around somebody else's betrayal. People still asked every now and then whether I regretted not telling him about Mason earlier. My answer settled over time. I regret underestimating how fragile some men's pride can be. I regret trusting the wrong cousin. I regret begging after the first clear sign that he wanted me more ashamed than understood. But I do not regret my past for existing before him. I was 16. I was foolish. I was human. None of that gave him the right to rewrite me as unworthy, so he could feel cleaner while doing dirtier things. That distinction took me a while to hold without shaking. I hold it now. The strangest part is that for a long time after all of this, I kept thinking the central betrayal was the kiss with Lucy, or the secret attention he let her give him, or even the canceled wedding. But that was not the deepest cut. The deepest cut was that he made me doubt the legitimacy of my own innocence. For a while, I actually lived inside his version. The version where I had brought ruin on myself by failing to disclose ancient history. The version where my shame explained everything else. The version where his behavior, however ugly, was somehow still downstream from my omission. That is what emotional cowardice does when it is skilled enough. It hands you the burden and tells you it was yours all along. It took me a long time to put that burden back where it belonged. On him. On Lucy. On the choices they made with full adult consciousness, not teenage confusion. I do not know what became of them in the long run. Not fully. I heard pieces over the years. Enough to know the story did not suddenly turn noble. Enough to know people who build something out of betrayal rarely get the clean, glowing future they imagine while wrecking somebody else's. Maybe they stayed together. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they hurt each other in ways that matched exactly who they had already shown themselves to be. By the time those possibilities stopped mattering to me, I knew I was finally out. That is the real consequence nobody sees from the outside. He did not just lose the wedding. He lost the version of me that would have spent a lifetime loving him loyally. Lucy did not just get what she wanted. She won access to a man who had already proven what kind of man he was under pressure. And I did not just lose a fiancé. I lost an illusion, which turned out to be worth losing. I still think sometimes about that Sunday night. The one where headlights swept across Teresa's house and all of us felt relief before we knew what had actually walked through the door. In my memory, that moment has changed more than any other. Back then, I thought the nightmare was ending because he was home. Now I know it was only beginning. Because the real disappearance was not where he spent that night. It was the moment the man I thought I was marrying vanished. And the one who came back was someone I should never have followed to the altar. What would you do in this situation? Be honest. Or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.